Have you ever held back from pursuing something meaningful because you feared you might fail? Perhaps you didn't apply for that job, didn't share your creative work, or avoided a conversation that mattered, all because somewhere deep inside, you believed that making a mistake would prove something fundamentally wrong about who you are. This fear isn't just about the possibility of failure itself. It's about the story we tell ourselves when we fail. It's the belief that one mistake, one setback, one moment of falling short somehow defines our entire worth as human beings. We live in a society obsessed with success. Everywhere we look, we see curated highlights of achievement. The entrepreneur who built an empire, the artist who went viral, the athlete who never seems to lose. What we don't see are the countless failures that preceded these successes, the rejections, the missteps, the moments of doubt. And so we internalize a dangerous fiction, that successful people don't fail, and that failure reveals an inherent inadequacy within us. We convince ourselves that our worth is measured by our ability to avoid mistakes, when in reality our humanity is defined by how we respond to them. Around 2,000 years ago, Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood something profound about human suffering. He observed that we are not disturbed by events themselves, but by our judgments about those events. When we fail at something, the failure itself is simply an occurrence, a fact of external circumstances. But when we interpret that failure as evidence of our worthlessness, when we let it define who we are, we create our own torment. The pain isn't in the mistake, it's in the meaning we assign to it. This video explores why we fear failure so intensely, how this fear imprisons us, and more importantly, how we can liberate ourselves from the belief that our mistakes define our worth. Because the truth is, failure isn't the opposite of success. It's an essential part of any meaningful life. And the sooner we understand this, the freer we become. The first thing we need to examine is where this fear comes from in the first place. Why do we equate failure with unworthiness? From our earliest years, many of us learn that love and acceptance are conditional. We're praised when we succeed, when we bring home good grades, when we win the game, when we please our parents and teachers, and we experience disappointment, criticism, or withdrawal of affection when we fall short. Even with the best intentions, this pattern teaches us something dangerous, that our value as human beings depends on our performance. We internalize the belief that we must earn our worth through achievement, and conversely, that failure strips us of that worth. This conditioning continues into adulthood. In the workplace, in relationships, on social media, we're constantly being evaluated, ranked, and compared. We see others succeeding while we struggle, and we interpret this as evidence of our inadequacy. The comparing mind doesn't rest. It's always asking, am I good enough? Do I measure up? And when the answer seems to be no, when we fail at something we attempted, the judgment is swift and merciless. You're not good enough. This failure proves it. But here's what's remarkable. This entire thought process is a construction, a story we tell ourselves, not an objective truth about reality. As Epictetus made clear in his Enchiridion, our opinions are within our control, even if external events are not. The failure itself, the external event, is not in our control. Perhaps we didn't get the job, or the relationship ended, or the project didn't work out. These are facts. But the interpretation that this failure defines our worth, that's a choice we're making, often unconsciously, and it's a choice we can unmake. The second thing we must understand is the devastating cost of this belief. When we think that one mistake defines our worth, we don't just suffer after we fail. We suffer in advance, and we suffer continuously. Think about how this fear shapes your behavior. If you believe that failure reveals your unworthiness, then the stakes of every endeavor become impossibly high. You can't just try something and see how it goes. You're putting your entire self-concept on the line every time you take a risk. This is what psychologists call ego involvement, and it's exhausting. Instead of focusing on the task at hand, learning and growing through the process, you're constantly monitoring yourself, judging yourself, catastrophizing about what failure would mean. This hypervigilance prevents you from entering what's often called the flow state, that immersed present moment experience where your best work happens. When you're terrified of making mistakes, you can't lose yourself in the activity. You're too busy protecting yourself. And ironically, this self-protection makes failure more likely. The archer who focuses too much on the prize, as the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi observed, loses his ability to shoot. The skill is the same, but the anxiety about the outcome paralyzes the performance. And so, to avoid this paralyzing fear, many people simply stop trying. They narrow their lives to include only those activities where success is guaranteed, where they already know they're competent. They stay in jobs that don't fulfill them because at least they're not failing. They don't pursue creative projects because the work might not be good enough. They don't enter relationships because rejection would be too painful. In the name of protecting their sense of worth, they sacrifice their growth, their aliveness, their potential. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer had a bleak view of human existence, but he understood something important about desire and suffering. He observed that we suffer both when we don't get what we want and when we do get it, because getting it never satisfies us for long. But there's another form of suffering he identified, the suffering that comes from not even trying, from living in the space between desire and action, paralyzed by fear. This is perhaps the most tragic suffering of all because it's entirely self-imposed. The prison has no walls. We're free to walk out at any time. But we don't, because we're terrified of what might happen if we do. The third insight we need is this: failure is not the opposite of success. It's evidence that you're living. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, spent considerable time reflecting on the nature of human activity and worth. In his meditations, he emphasized that we are designed to act, to contribute, to do our work in the world. But he also recognized that outcomes are not in our control. We can control our effort, our intentions, our persistence, but we cannot control whether a particular endeavor succeeds or fails. The universe has its own plans, and they don't always align with ours. From this perspective, failure loses its sting. If you gave genuine effort, if you acted with integrity, if you did your best with what you knew at the time, then you fulfilled your role. The outcome doesn't reflect on your worth. It reflects the interplay of countless factors beyond your control. You can fail and still have acted well. In fact, you must be willing to fail if you want to act at all. Consider what failure actually means. At its core, failure is feedback. It's information about what didn't work, a data point in your ongoing experiment of living. Thomas Edison, when asked about his many failed attempts to create the light bulb, famously said he hadn't failed. He just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. Each so-called failure brought him closer to success because he treated it as learning rather than as a judgment on his character. But this reframing requires something difficult. It requires us to separate our actions from our identity, to distinguish between what we do and who we are. When we fail at something, we failed at that particular thing, in that particular moment, with that particular set of circumstances and knowledge. It doesn't mean we are failures as human beings. Yet this is exactly the leap our minds want to make. One mistake, and suddenly, we're applying it to our entire existence, as if our worth as conscious beings could be diminished by an unsuccessful project or a rejected proposal. Epictetus would say this is a category error. You are not your performance. You are not your achievements. You are not other people's opinions of you. These are all external things, not in your complete control, and therefore not the proper basis for your sense of self-worth. What you are, fundamentally, is a being with the capacity for reason, for virtue, for choosing how you respond to circumstances. And that capacity cannot be taken away by failure. No matter how many times you fall short externally, you retain the inner faculty to act with courage, wisdom, justice, and moderation. That's where your worth lies, not in the outcomes of your endeavors. The fourth and perhaps most liberating realization is that the people we admire most, the ones we hold up as exemplars of success, have typically failed more than most people have even tried. Consider the biography of almost anyone who achieved something significant. You'll find a pattern of repeated failures, setbacks, rejections, and mistakes. The entrepreneur who went bankrupt before building a successful company. The writer whose first 5 novels were rejected by every publisher. The scientist whose theories were mocked by peers before being proven correct. The athlete who was cut from teams, who lost championships, who struggled with injury and self-doubt. These people didn't succeed because they never failed. They succeeded because they failed repeatedly and kept going anyway. What separates them from those who gave up isn't some special quality that makes them immune to failure. It's their relationship with failure. They didn't interpret setbacks as evidence of unworthiness. They saw them as inevitable, even necessary parts of the process. They understood that growth happens at the edge of competence, in that uncomfortable zone where failure is not just possible, but likely. And they were willing to inhabit that zone because they valued growth more than they feared judgment. This is the attitude we must cultivate if we want to live fully. Not an attitude of recklessness or carelessness, but one of courageous engagement with life, despite its uncertainties. The Stoics called this the dichotomy of control, focusing our energy on what we can control, our effort and our character, while accepting that outcomes will often disappoint us. When we adopt this framework, failure becomes much less frightening. We stop asking, "What if I fail and prove I'm worthless?" and start asking, "What can I learn? How can I grow? What's the next step?" But let's be honest, this shift isn't easy. The belief that mistakes define our worth is deeply rooted, reinforced by years of conditioning and by a culture that worships success while hiding failure. So how do we actually change this belief? How do we rewire our relationship with failure? The first step is awareness. Notice when you're catastrophizing about potential failure, when you're treating a specific setback as evidence of your overall inadequacy. Catch yourself in the act of this mental habit. Epictetus suggested that we should examine our impressions, questioning the automatic judgments that arise in our minds. When the thought comes, "I failed, therefore I'm worthless," pause. Ask yourself, is this actually true? Is my worth as a human being really dependent on the outcome of this one endeavor? What would I tell a friend who was thinking this way? This kind of gentle, rational examination can create space between the event of failure and your emotional reaction to it. You begin to see that you have options in how you interpret what's happening. The failure is real, but the meaning you give it is flexible. The second step is practice. You have to actively put yourself in situations where failure is possible, even likely, and observe what happens. This isn't about being reckless. It's about gradually expanding your comfort zone, proving to yourself that failure doesn't destroy you. Start small if you need to. Try something new, something you're not good at. Share creative work before it's perfect. Have a difficult conversation. Apply for an opportunity you're not quite qualified for. And when failure inevitably comes, as it will, practice responding to it constructively. What did I learn? What would I do differently next time? How did this experience help me grow? Over time, with repeated exposure, the fear of failure loses its grip. You develop what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, the understanding that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and learning. Failure isn't a judgment, it's part of the learning process. People with a growth mindset don't enjoy failure, but they're not devastated by it either. They expect it, learn from it, and move forward. The third step is compassion, particularly self-compassion. We're often incredibly harsh with ourselves in ways we would never be with others. When a friend fails at something, we offer encouragement, perspective, understanding. We remind them that one setback doesn't define them, that they're still worthy of love and respect. But when we fail, we unleash a torrent of self-criticism and shame. We need to turn that compassion inward, to treat ourselves with the same kindness we extend to others. This doesn't mean making excuses or avoiding responsibility. It means acknowledging that being human involves making mistakes, falling short, failing to live up to our own standards sometimes. It means recognizing that our worth isn't conditional on perfect performance. As the Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron writes, the root of suffering is resisting the certainty that no matter what the circumstances, uncertainty is all we truly have. We will fail. We will make mistakes. This is certain. The question is whether we'll treat ourselves with cruelty or kindness when it happens. There's a Zen story about a student who comes to a master. Distraught about all his failures, the master takes him to a window and points to a tree. "Do you see that tree?" he asks. "It's been struck by lightning, broken by storms, its branches torn off by wind. Yet it still stands, still grows, still provides shade. The tree doesn't question its worth because it lost a branch. It simply continues to be a tree." We are like that tree. Life will strike us with failures and setbacks. We may lose branches, parts of ourselves we thought were essential. But our fundamental nature, our basic worth as conscious beings, remains. We can still grow, still provide value, still participate in the miracle of existence. The final insight I want to leave you with is perhaps the most important. Your worth is not something you earn through achievement or lose through failure. It's something you possess by virtue of being alive, being conscious, being part of this mysterious universe. You don't have to prove your worth. You have to recognize it was always there. This might sound like empty reassurance, but consider it philosophically. What is worth? How do we determine it? If worth comes from achievement, then it's constantly in flux, constantly at risk, dependent on circumstances beyond your control. But if worth is intrinsic, if it's simply a quality of being human, then it's stable, permanent, untouchable by external events. The Stoics believed the latter. They argued that your worth comes from your capacity for reason and virtue, capacities that remain regardless of your successes or failures in the world. From this perspective, fearing that failure will expose your unworthiness is a profound misunderstanding. There's nothing to expose because your worth isn't hidden in your achievements. It's always present, always available, requiring nothing more than your existence. You could fail at every single thing you attempt for the rest of your life, and you would still be a being of immense value, still capable of joy, love, growth, and meaning. This doesn't mean we shouldn't strive, shouldn't attempt difficult things, shouldn't have ambitions. It means we should pursue these things from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, from a desire to express ourselves and grow rather than to prove ourselves and survive. When your worth isn't on the line, you're free to take risks, to experiment, to play, to fail without devastation. You're free to live. So the next time you find yourself paralyzed by the fear of failure, ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Usually it's not the failure itself, but the story I'll tell about what the failure means. And that story is just that, a story, not an objective truth. You can choose a different narrative. You can choose to see failure as feedback, as learning, as evidence that you're engaged with life rather than hiding from it. You can choose to separate your actions from your identity, to recognize that what you do is not who you are. And most importantly, you can choose to stop placing your worth at the mercy of outcomes you don't control. Your worth is not up for debate. It's not conditional on success. It never was. One mistake, one failure, one rejection does not and cannot define you. Only you get to do that. And you can define yourself as someone who tries, who learns, who grows, who treats themselves with compassion, who engages courageously with the uncertainty of existence. That's the person worth being. Not the person who never fails, but the person who fails and continues anyway, who stumbles and gets back up, who makes mistakes and learns from them. That's the life worth living, not the safe, small life that avoids risk and possibility, but the expansive, meaningful life that accepts failure as the price of admission to anything worthwhile. Thank you for watching.